Уважаемые дамы и господа,
Ladies and gentlemen, we now begin the plenary session of the 10th anniversary St. Petersburg International Gas Forum. Natural gas, new challenges and solutions for the global energy sector. We welcome the speakers of the plenary session. Deputy Chairman of the Gazprom Management Committee, Director General of the Gazprom Expert, Yelena Burmistrova. Chairman of the Executive Board, CEO OMV AG, Mr. Alfred Stern. President of the International Gas Union, Dr. Zhou Kang. Chief Executive Officer, Uniper SE, Professor Dr. Klaus-Dieter Maubach. Part of our plenary session is happening in the online format. Through video conference, we have participating Chairman of the World Energy Council, Mr. Jean-Marie Daugé. Also, online participation for Integrated Gas, Renewables and Energy Solutions Director, member of the Executive Committee, Royal Dutch Shell Company, Mr. Maarten Wetzelaar. Moderator of the plenary session, President of the Global Energy Association, Sergei Brylyov. Good afternoon. I think we can wrap it up already. You have all seen the prices for gas. Well, it went a bit down. All right, let's talk. That's unprecedented times that we're meeting right now, especially remembering what Mr. President told us yesterday. Of course, today we would like to hear some systemic opinions from our guests. Why don't we begin with Madam Burmistrova? That's inevitable, I'm sorry. Please, Elena, the floor is yours. Do not forget to turn your microphone on. Thank you, Mr. Brylyov. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to see so many people here in this plenary hall here at our anniversary 10th St. Petersburg International Gas Forum. I see so many familiar faces. And I feel even better because we are meeting at those very complicated times for the gas market. I'm especially grateful because today we have this chance to discuss all the most important topics, gas sector and generally energy sector. We see how the whole world these days is closely following the prices for gas increasing more and more and breaking new records. Several weeks ago, we could not even imagine such high prices, but today it is a reality. In all the major trading centers, gas is becoming more and more expensive. The price for the volumes to supply for 1 year ahead at TTF Regional Hub, the prices came up to almost $2,000 for 1,000 cubic meters. Why is that happening? Let's try and answer this question. Well, there are several factors that contributed to that. Several factors contributed the higher demand, very cold winter and cold spring in Europe, and we saw how the underground gas storage facilities were filled with a slower pace. That increase in the demand actually slowed down the restoration of economic circumstances. And also, there was another factor. We were forced to stop using coal as a source for energy generation. That was linked to the higher prices for quotas. Also, there was lower demand for hydro energy sources and wind generation. At the same time, there were supply factors. Quite big volumes of LNG were sent to some more favorable Asian markets, where in the recent times gas was more expensive than in Europe. That was caused by the so-called Asian benefit. For many years in a row in Europe, they were saying that Russian pipeline gas only increases that dependence on one single supplier, differently from more flexible LNG. But let's have a look at the real market these days. We see how the more flexible gas has voted with US dollars and went out to premium markets, basically leaving Europe there all alone facing all of those challenges. It's worth just looking at the loads for LNG terminals. Just look at them and you will figure how much gas is not coming to European consumers. At the same time, there was a drop down in the manufacturing production in European Union, some technical disruptions and postponement of repairs for a number of suppliers caused by the pandemics. Unfortunately, that also limited supplies. At the same time, as the gas was becoming more and more expensive, in the recent years we saw less and less deals made at European hubs. Why so? Apparently, members of the European markets and actors there are not willing to keep acting in these circumstances. In the recent 4 months of 2021, the volume of gas with the supply for the next day and the next month at the TTF hub, these figures has grown almost by 40%. Just think about it. In September 2021, that indicator went down twice. The liquidity of trading at hub also makes us actually doubt how representatives are the prices at the swap sites. What is happening right now is actually demonstrating to us that the European spot market is only reflecting the current state of supply and demand, only the state of right here, right now, and actually is not an instrument of price forming that would contribute to the construction and the building up of the long-term balance between sellers and buyers. We see high volatility of prices, which makes both sellers and buyers disoriented. There are very high risks for destabilization of the economy of the whole region. In the recent years, European Union officials, as well as many European experts, have urged all the market actors to say no to long-term contracts with oil responsibilities, with that binding agreement. Just take it and buy it. We've always voted for this kind of contract. There are plenty of benefits in those contracts. These benefits are still there, and they are becoming even more and more obvious in our crisis situation. In our industry, with such high figures of investment, with very long investment cycle, this long-term type of contract is the only form of work that could make the investors confident in every part of the supply chain, starting from exploration and extraction and ending with transportation and energy consumption in energy-efficient sectors. Just already several years ago, Gazprom was often blamed for the big share of oil in the long-term contracts. We were often told that the gas market is already well developed and it would be very effective to, work with that mechanism of gas indexation. Look at what is happening today. Just go and ask large actors of European market how much spot gas is cheaper than the other kind of it. What is the comparison between these two kinds of gas? The short-term spot deal gas. What is the price about that one? Also, let's not forget about our ability to forecast the price. Of course, everybody wants to buy gas for some affordable price. That's good, but it's even better to know in advance how much gas will cost in 1 week, in 1 month, or in 4 months. Now, we all see at exchange market how much we could possibly pay for this uncertainty that we're living in. Of course, if we're closely linked to oil, gas can be, relevantly cheap or relevantly high. That's true. Prices are volatile. But still, if we can foresee that, we can be prepared for certain risks. More importantly, for a long-term perspective, if we're working with a long-term contract, we can care about interests of both buyers and sellers. A lot is being said about record prices for gas in Europe, but not many people are actually speaking about the volumes of those trading, because the volume of long-term physical gas supply can actually guarantee warmth for the upcoming long winter months. In this regard, Gazprom has always said and will keep saying that we've been fulfilling all of our contractual responsibilities with all of our counteragents in the framework of all of our long-term contract. We are fulfilling all the supplies that we've contractually binded to do so. We also sometimes supply volumes that are even bigger that are written in our contracts. From the beginning of the year, we've supplied almost record amounts of gases to European market. We've increased supplies to the biggest market in Europe, to Germany. It's now 30 times bigger in comparison with the last year. 2 times more YOY to Turkey. Romania, 4 times more YOY. All the routes, including the Ukrainian one, by the way, every time when we could, we supplied more and increased the volumes of gas supplied to the market. Dear colleagues, we are now meeting and having this conversation at unprecedented times. We see how the gas market is undergoing this historical crisis. Of course, every one of us is interested to survive this very tough challenge. And we shall actually build this image of gas as a very competitive and reliable source of energy. I'm convinced that we can only achieve this if we join our efforts. Just to lighten up the atmosphere a little bit, we just recently talked with our colleagues at the speakers' room, and in the morning, the first question was, what's the gas price for today? We saw that after yesterday's meeting held by the president of Russian Federation, and after all the statements made yesterday, the gas prices went significantly down, right? So that was a sigh of relief this morning, and everyone was like, well, thank God. And only in this close cooperation of manufacturer and consumer, we can balance up this market more or less so that it will thrive and survive. Thank you very much. I thank you for your attention.
Once again, I congratulate the organizers of the forum because it's the anniversary forum, and I'd like to tell you one story. Once there was the 5th anniversary forum, Russia, Latin America, and the facilities of St. Petersburg University. At the forum, there was an energy session, and I was one of the co-organizers. There was a general secretary from Latin America Association and the representatives of European associations who offered an unexpected for us, when I say us, I mean Russia and Europe, they offered an unexpected attitude to renewable sources of energy because they have lots of wind and solar energy. So solar energy, wind energy are already competitive there without any subsidies from the European Commission, which doesn't exist there. And when I asked a question to them, are you going in this case to develop green hydrogen, you know, electrolysis, which is based on renewable sources of energy, they said, no, we are going to do it only for export. Because no matter what happens, the price will go up, and our consumers will not forgive us for that from the political point of view. Now, going back to the habitual interpretation of the energy transition balance, in Germany, the situation is so that 1/3 of supplies go there. We meet not only at the 10th anniversary St. Petersburg International Forum, but we also meet at the day when the coalition negotiations start. And these are the coalition debates in Germany about the creation of the new government. They were the negotiations about coalitions between the Green Party and other parties of Germany. So the Green Party are going to be definitely members of coalitions in Germany. Either this or that, they will decide. Don't you think that the presence of Green Party in the German government will be an obstacle for further supplies from Russia? Thank you very much, Mr. Brylov. You always have really interesting questions. I don't think that I can comment on political events, but I can comment some of the statements that we heard in the election campaign of the Green Party. For example, they spoke about the fact that they say no to the construction of transportation infrastructure for gas supplies, rejection to construct LNG terminals, and I think that the situation on the market has given an answer instead of me. We completely understand that the investment cycle in our industry is very long and very capital intensive. So such statements, of course, demotivate companies to organize investments into the infrastructure, to exploration, production, and refinery. So we, at the same time, understand what Europe faced in terms of renewable sources of energy. There is no doubt that it's an important component of the portfolio, and renewables have their right to be there, but we cannot say that we can completely replace the supplies of traditional energy sources such as gas, oil, and even coal, as we can see today, with renewables. So they wanted to say no to coal by 2038, but now the European Commission declares that they're going to say no to coal completely by 2030. But you can see that the prices for gas have grown, and today there are no other alternatives that would help us tackle this crisis challenge. It's not only about Europe, it's about different regions of the world. We can see that there are limitations in terms of energy supplies in China, what happens with the purchasing of LNG, oil, and coal. So I believe that there are some political statements on the one hand, but on the other hand, there's also economic activity, and the heads of state and governments shall first of all care about the safety of their citizens and countries, and the rationale should help us here. I would like to explain it to the European partners that the Russian opinion, not only corporate opinion, is not medieval. And it's great that we have the head of Bashkiria here. So in the remote region, the solar energy can work perfectly there, because you cannot bring a pipe and it's very far away. And now I would like to say hi to Strogovit district in not far from St. Petersburg, and we checked how the pipeline was laid there within the framework of gasification. And I just asked a simple question, guys, why don't you install solar panels here? Why don't you install windmills here? And the answer was very short: we live in Russia. Basically, there are safe sources of energy. And now I'm ready to give the mic to Alfred Stern, Chairman of the Executive Board, CEO, OMV AG. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Gazprom for making this anniversary gas conference possible here in beautiful St. Petersburg. It's really a great honor to be here, and I'm very happy to also represent OMV here. I think this year's key industry event takes place at a most decisive moment with truly new challenges for the global energy sector. We are embracing an era of multiple levels, actually. First of all, we are on the verge of the much-needed energy transition that has been mentioned already, aiming to bring CO2 emissions to much lower levels from where they are today. It is a must that we slow down and eventually stop global warming, and it must be done on a global scale. At the same time, we all have the aspiration and sincere will to provide our children and the generations to come with a planet worth living. Innovation and technology has brought us to where we are today, in prosperity and modern lifestyle. And it will also be innovation and technology driving the energy transition in the future. Access to cheap energy is a key driver for prosperity. And we have to invest in innovation and technology to provide access to cheap energy at lower greenhouse gas emissions. Secondly, we are all part of economic growth picking up much faster and more forcefully than expected, after global economies were facing heavy dips due to the still ongoing pandemic. This unexpected and steep increase in demand is visibly creating strain in various parts of the gas markets. which have in recent years emerged from regional markets towards a global market. When we are confronted with news that energy prices have not seen such hikes since 1981 as they do today, we cannot just move on. We need to address the most important element in the discussion of increasing energy demand and prices, and that is secure, sustainable, and affordable energy is the basis for prosperous economic development, social peace, and stability. Reliable energy supply also means 24/7 availability. During the just ending summer, we painfully experienced what happens if demand and supply are unbalanced, and if we cannot supply the required energy. As our energy system is transformed to renewable energy, we have to ensure that we can reliably supply the necessary energy and compensate for unexpected or unpredictable and potentially sudden changes in demand or supply. In fact, the true core of the discussion is that right now we don't have enough energy, neither renewable or gas in Europe. The development over the last couple of months made us realize the secure energy supply today requires natural gas, especially as the lasting renaissance of coal cannot be an option and needs to be avoided. As you know, a record high amount of gas, around 66 billion cubic meters, was withdrawn from the working gas inventories in the European Union during the winter of 2020 to 2021. In Europe, the long-lasting cold winter, the powerful recovery of the European economy, combined with less inflow of LNG reaching the market, and renewable contributing less because of less wind, have led to a shortage and the much higher energy prices. While we all wish that we could achieve the energy transition instantaneously, today's facts would suggest it prudent that a combination of growing renewables and natural gas as the bridging energy is necessary to allow economies to grow into low CO2 era and at the same time ensure affordable and secure energy supply for households and industry. And this brings me to my third point, the continuous need for investments in energy infrastructure, where infrastructure includes both the production and the distribution of power and gas. When speaking about infrastructure, dear ladies and gentlemen, please let me make use of this opportunity to underline one project, a project that has been completed recently despite many obstacles. Nord Stream 2 is an important contribution by those who have responsibly made investments to diversify Europe's gas infrastructure, which Gazprom has proven over the last many years in partnership with 5 well-known European utilities as financing partners. We very much hope that gas deliveries to Europe will also start quite soon via Nord Stream 2 to rebalance demand and supply. The announcement that Russia is ready to supply more gas to Europe is very encouraging. Ladies and gentlemen, OMV is ready to join and support the pathway towards significantly reduced CO2 emissions. We are currently reviewing our strategy, but already today we invest in circular economy projects and in green technologies and increasing our gas production, including more sustainable and green feedstock for production sites and our products. And many other companies, might it be steel or cement, have similar aspirations to decrease emissions. The fact that for such a transformation, more power is needed is without any doubt. And this power needs to be as sustainable, reliable, and cheap as possible. Allow me to repeat. Innovation and technology will continue to drive that change. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, we also have to acknowledge the importance of natural gas for the entire economic system. We highly appreciate Gazprom's all-weather partnership in providing energy supply. OMV's partnership with Gazprom has a uniquely strong foundation. Elena Burmistrova, I trust that we will jointly build on this foundation also in the future. Again, it is really great to be here and meet with real people at a time where we have learned to recognize that this is a privilege. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stern. Thank you for commenting on Nord Stream 2. I would like to use my position here and please have a look at Vesti program next Saturday. That would be interesting. We made quite an interesting experiment at the location when the pipeline goes under the water. I'm not going to tell the secret to Gazprom management. They might punish me for that.
Stands for. Well, I've actually prepared this picture for you. It's Rowan, Ribina in Russian. Remember that word. It's a key word given the circumstances. Is Rowan in your part of the world red enough? There was a very lively discussion about Rowan here at the forum yesterday. If it's red enough, you've got to have a very cold winter. So Mr. Gustov here said that it's red enough, so the supply for Russian natural gas is actually something automatic for the coming months. Elena Burmistrova. Oh, by the way, how do you pronounce her surname? Because foreigners typically say Burmistrova. The same applies to Sharapova, the tennis player, but whatever the pronunciation, the efficiency is quite high. Referred to the old-fashioned contracts being the desired scheme, right? Some of their contracts for many years, they're based on a understandable formula so that you can actually predict the price for the future. But then in this last several years, as far as the European Union policy is concerned, we've seen a reverse picture. Well, you yourself said that the market has changed dramatically. Now, you can't, of course, dictate your will to the European Commission, but is there a chance whatsoever that in the coming months we'll be having sort of a coming back to what we used to have, where prices were indeed predictable?
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think this is, of course, always interesting to look at things from looking back in history and then trying to think about what we would have done instead. I think the liberalization of the European gas market is actually what got us to where we are today, and sure, people saw the effects of it also last year when the gas prices plummeted. But of course, then there's also the consequences when the demand increases more than the supply capability. And I believe, as we can see across Europe, quite an intensive discussion about the level of gas prices that we have reached. Some countries even taking some rather extreme measures to try and cap the market prices. But this can only be, also legally, only be a temporary measure. Still, if we believe in a free market economy, a liberalization is a good thing, and leads us again to the thought of making sure that the right amount investments goes into satisfying the demand. So when we can balance supply and demand, this is what will get us back in the right place.
But do you expect any sort of a revision in the coming months, or no one will take responsibility for what's happened?
So I think the level of discussion, I think it would be wrong to say that nobody takes responsibility. I think people take the situation extremely serious, and will, of course, think about the consequences of this situation. What the result will be, I would like not to speculate at this point.
Thank you. Вы не думаете, что я не...
Please do not think badly of me. I remember quite well what Mr. President said yesterday. We're going to come back to that later after everyone speaks. Dr. Jo Kang, President, International Gas Union, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And Sergey, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm very honored to be with you once again. And all distinguished speakers, especially Elena, Vice Chairman of the Gazprom. I can speak my speech and with good news. Your President Putin provided us a kind of a vaccine against the gas turbulence. So that's a kind of a relief to the gas market. Well, the natural gas has never been as important to the global society. I believe gas will be a key narrative in the next couple of days to come on the platform of the new challenge and the solution. Gas has massive advantages include heat intensity, air pollution, greenhouse emission, and the scalability. Gas has growing importance of dynamics on the perspective of energy access, socio-economic development, sustainability, and the environment. Natural gas is a major solution to these challenges. It's better than alternative. Until there is a new energy technology revolution, then our core message is gas works. If the world is concerned about the pollution, we must demonstrate that natural gas is a part of a solution. Natural gas today and the portfolio of decarbonized gases, including hydrogen, tomorrow will be catalyst for and the foundation of a more sustainable energy future. Natural gas can be a major positive catalyst for the cleaner environment through the fuel switching from the dirtier fuels. Fuel switching to natural gas alone can deliver reduction of 5.5 gigatons of the energy sector CO2 emission and drive air pollution down globally. This technology is available today. We should therefore not see climate purely as a challenge, but as an opportunity. If dirty fuels become politically or socially too expensive, then gas is primed to become beneficial. The climate debate should not be seen as driver for natural gas demand. There is a uniquely harmonious relationship between natural gas and the renewable. I do not believe that natural gas should view itself in competition with the renewable energy. Europe's decarbonization focus is clear to us all. It would, however, be impossible on both a financial investment basis and the engineering basis without secure supply of natural gas that keeps Europe energized and warm. Secure and reliable supplies of natural gas are core foundation of Europe's decarbonization. Natural gas is an ideal partner for the renewable energy, which should also be seen as a driver for the natural gas demand. Gas as a driver of social economy and the industrial value in the developing world. Much of the developing world suffers from the significant energy poverty crisis. The IEA suggests that the 1.6 billion people in developing Asia have no access to clean cooking facilities. That is roughly 20% of world population. Nearly 10% of the population in Central and Southern Asia lack reliable electricity access. This creates brake on the regional socio-economic development. There will be more than 2 billion additional people living on the planet by 2050, which much of that growth coming from the so-called developing world. Natural gas is a vital driver of a socio-economic development across developing world, just as been in the developed world. Much of Europe, North America, the Asia have benefited from the gas' unique properties. Gas is and will remain foundation of a developed world energy system. Why should the developed world benefit from the industrialization and deny the benefit to the rest of the world? Natural gas enables quick, clean, and affordable expansion of energy access. New gas infrastructure and the increased natural gas usage can propel economies across the region, reducing monetary and energy poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, natural gas also created socio-economic value through the inherent public health advantage. Enhance the use of gas today in the industrial and the domestic environment could drastically cut the air pollution and thereby reduce 7 million death pollution caused every year. Emerging gas technology will continue this trend and create long-term demand for natural gas. The IGU advocates that the major emerging demand generated for natural gas could be hydrogen, even though hydrogen is a secondary energy. Hydrogen should not be seen as a competitor. The infrastructure and the financial challenges are profound. For instance, Japan would have to more than double the current renewable power generation capacity just for its steel industry needs. Blue or turquoise hydrogen produced from the decarbonized natural gas is a necessary component and one that is much more ready being scaled. We should therefore look to the potential of a multicolored hydrogen as a major demand generator for natural gas. Long-term investment is vital to the energy security. I have one final point to make. I wish congratulate Gazprom on the construction of Nord Stream 2. The commitment of $1 billion of investment capital and the thousands of hours of human capacity are both vital if gas value chain is continue its role as a foundation of the catalyst for the more sustainable energy system. The current pricing environment is derived from the strong and the constant demand across the globe, based on the combination of post-COVID recovery in the developed world and the ongoing needs of industrializing in the developing economy. Put simply, world needs more gas to meet needs of a growing population that wants the highest quality standard of living. However, due to the emphasis of environmental policy and the energy transition, significant pressure has been put on supply-side energy dynamic, whilst no constraint has been placed on demand. This has created tighter global gas market. There is a limited additional gas liquidity to meet this demand, and the gas is not the oil. We cannot simply open up the valves and manage global supply through the swaps. To this situation, one must add in inherent intermittent nature of renewable energy. And the year of some of the lowest wind yields in history, natural gas price have therefore seen recent perfect storm. This is why I'm congratulate organizations such as Gazprom that has shown commitment to security supplying world with natural gas. We request the policymakers around the world recognize the unique role of natural gas for keeping society energized and warm, both in the developed and the developing market. Ladies and gentlemen, as you heard, there is many reasons to be positive about the natural gas demand, how we can promote unique, attractive characteristic of a blue fuel, both today, far into the future. I believe that for multiple generations, as long as the human society needs energy, it will need natural gas. I look toward seeing you all in person at the World Gas Conference 2022 in Korea, where we can once again come together to defend, promote, celebrate the role of gas, the value it creates for the global society. Thank you so much. Sabasaba.
Спасибо большое, доктор Канг, за ваш призыв к...
Thank you, Mr. Khan, for you advocating for calm dialogue about the energy transition. And I would like to express my gratitude to Mr. Zubkov, the management of Gazprom, Surgutneft, Gas, and other companies for all the support that you give to the Energy Award, where we also continue this dialogue. So recently in Kazan, we have announced the laureates of the Energy Award. The awards will be provided next week, and among the laureates, which were chosen by a professional jury and gurus from abroad, they have chosen interesting projects related to photosynthesis, but as far as traditional energy is concerned, people voted for environmental research, even in coal industry, and that was the prerequisite for growing prices for coal. And it's interesting that we calculate gas not in correlation with oil, but we see that there is a correlation between gas and coal. And I would like to recall one joke which Professor Maubach shared with us, but I don't want to steal the joke from him, so I hand over to him, please.
Thank you for that. I don't recall any joke.
The vaccine.
No, the vaccine was already addressed by my fellow friend from Korea. We joked about kind of the president of Russia talking about the gas prices yesterday. And this had an immediate effect on gas prices, obviously. Quite significant, I would even say.
So the anti-prices vaccine.
This is the anti-price vaccine to a certain extent. So obviously the president knows how to deal with that. Now, dear Elena Bostrova, dear panelists, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me for this conference. It's a pleasure to be here representing Uniper, a company that is for more than 5 decades a partner to Gazprom. And I can build on what was already said, and I would also like to congratulate Gazprom on the completion of Nord Stream 2. Our view was always that Nord Stream 2 will be an important part of the gas import infrastructure of Europe. This is now already evident, I have to admit, quicker than I anticipated. The topic of our panel is well chosen. Newspapers, media are full of headlines about energy, in particular about energy topics around prices and energy security of supply. On one hand, there are calls for a fast decarbonization from large parts of society and from politics. It was also referred to that we had recently elections in Germany, and we all looking forward to see how the German government will be formed. On the other hand, we see rising energy and gas prices for weeks now, some of them reaching even all-time highs. The further increase of renewable energies in the mix of energy has certainly positive effects on the climate, but we have to acknowledge that these challenges, due to the volatile nature of renewable power, causes also some challenges with that production, sort of production of power. In terms of energy prices, in Europe, I would dare to say that we are in uncharted territory. It is not even 18 months ago that we saw spot prices around 5 to 6 euro per megawatt hour at the TTF, the most liquid hub in Europe. End of September, we have seen prices around 90 euros per megawatt hour. Yesterday, we were well beyond 100, and luckily, we are now back to, I think, 100 or slightly below. Customers clearly suffer from high gas prices and increased pressure on politics to solve the problem. Energy-intensive industries get under pressure, especially those which use gas as a feedstock. Some go even out of business. Utilities also face difficulties depending on their sourcing strategies. So one thing is clear, prices which are too low are bad for our business, but prices which are that high are also bad for our business mid to long term. And hence, we are grateful that we have seen price developments since yesterday. Let's see how this is going to develop going forward. There is this famous triangle of our energy business, energy security, environmental sustainability, energy equity, something that we have to achieve simultaneously, and it's the art of our energy business to manage all three elements at the very same time. This is a big challenge that we are all asked to contribute to and overcome and find solutions for. At Uniper, we have defined our so-called transition agenda. It was referred to a number of times from the panelists that we are trying to organize the transition of the energy sector, and we're also trying to prepare for the upcoming changes in our sector. Number one, part of that strategy is we respect the call for decarbonization, and we want to be part of this process. We have defined an exit path for our European lignite and hard coal fleet. Furthermore, we permanently want to improve the carbon footprint of our remaining power production fleet. Second, we target to expand our carbon-free position by either direct exposure to the renewable value chain or act as an enabler for renewable projects. And third, most important, gas continues to play a vital role at Uniper, also in the future. We believe, that was said also a number of times, that gas is the perfect match for the energy transition, and hence we see stable demand. Now, looking at our activities, also that I can reiterate, gas will be part of the solution, and gas is not part of the problem. This view is obviously shared by markets. Gas demand in Europe will stay by and large stable, and Russian supply will stay the most important pillar. Gas is a valuable partner in markets like Germany that want to increase further their renewable share, as gas power plants are fast, flexible, and comparable clean. From a global perspective, the outlook for gas is even better, as the demand in Asia is expected to grow significantly. This is why we want to continue to do business with our Russian partner, Gazprom, and why we are active in the LNG business as well. With this outlook, I want to finish my words, looking forward to a discussion or to your questions.
I'll ask Helena first. А вот это вот, как сказать?
Well, this Humpty Dumpty, will it lead to the fact that the contracts will be formed differently? You mean gas is not a problem, it's a solution. So do you think that something will change for contracts? Do you think that Europeans are going to change their approach to signing contracts with Gazprom company? Well, first of all, as it was mentioned by all the speakers, first of all, we want to have a well-balanced market. For the market to be well-balanced and predictable, which is as important as the balance itself, the logic should be there. And we should focus not on spot prices that might lead us to Humpty Dumpty situation when you just move from one place to another. You don't have the predictability and ability to have a proper business. When you check what happens with the trading and the volume of trading, you see that the suppliers were not ready, and we saw cases with bankruptcies. We feel pity for all the countries. It was a colossal shock for the economies of all the countries. All the reasonable people understand it. Will the structure of the contracts change? Well, it's a good question. If we understand that long-term contracts is what helps us survive in difficult times of crisis, then perhaps we will search for proper models that will work fine for the suppliers, consumers, and producers. So, those who have signed long-term contracts with us simply enjoy the prices right now. Thank you. Then I will not ask you the question about the statements by Vladimir Putin. So what do you want, to pay the penalty and get rid of the Ukrainian transit?
National gas, Russian national gas arrives. Is it via Ukraine? Is it using some diversion? Does it matter?
If I were very, very, very blunt, I would say I couldn't care less. I think it's up for our Russian partners to decide on which route they are deciding for, which route they select. Obviously, there is now, hopefully very soon, another important route available to Gazprom exporting gas to Europe, not only to Germany. And it's their decision whether they are selecting the Ukraine route, Polish route, or Nord Stream 2, or whatever is available. I think it's good to see that obviously there is an impact that we can hopefully already see that completing additional gas import infrastructure to Europe will have an impact also on gas prices. And that is a fundamental, I think, learning also from the Nord Stream 2 project. And hence, the ball is back to Gazprom, what kind of route they are going to choose. But we are happy if Gazprom would, as they do, not only deliver the volumes that they have contracted with us, and I can only confirm this is being done every day, by the way, for 50 years meanwhile, but if they also kind of deliver more volumes in order to kind of cool down the situation in the European gas price markets.
Dr. Stern, I think the German for a question is Frage, so I'm asking you the same Frage. Does it matter?
Yeah, thank you for the same Frage. I would like to take a bit of a commercial approach to this, a business approach to this, and I think we all well understand that for functioning markets, it's very important to have a diversification of both production, but also of distribution of things. And I believe that this is something that we will see as economic activity expands. Energy demand will also expand, and for this we need to have the right investments into the infrastructure, and that's both on the production and the distribution side. I do see the challenges in the industry that we are in, that most or all of those projects are extremely long-term projects, and that is what requires long investment cycles and a visionary view on how to progress this. From a business perspective, I would therefore say any diversification in production and in distribution is a welcome investment, and making sure that we keep the supply and the demand in balance.
I think the German for international relations is internationale Beziehungen. Let's switch into the internationale Beziehungen. We have with us Jean-Marie Dauger, Chairman of the World Energy Council based in London. The very council, which next year is organizing its own congress here in St. Petersburg. So we're all preparing for this. Sir, the floor is yours. We can't hear you, I'm afraid. Is your mic switched on?
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to join the 10th anniversary of the St. Petersburg Gas Forum. Having been personally involved in the gas industry for a very long time, I can testify of the decisive role that Russia plays and has played for the supply, regular supply of natural gas to Europe and others. And I'm convinced that there is room for this to continue in a quite different context for the many years to come. The World Energy Council is an independent, neutral, and truly global non-profit organization with 100 years of heritage of managing energy for peace and prosperity. We do not advocate for any particular country, nor technology, nor sources of energy, but brings common sense people together with institutions and politicians and many stakeholders to freely better understand, exchange, and learn from the best practices in the scope of energy issues. Well, the COVID-19 has produced the worst economic shock since the 20s of the preceding century. The sanitary situation is not yet controlled everywhere, but we can reasonably or carefully be optimistic that this will happen in the reasonable next future. GDP is back to growth with slightly less than 6% expected for this year. And the demand for energy is back to the anti-COVID level in many countries already. But what does the COVID has changed? Awareness of fragilities of our economic systems has increased the demand for more active push for action, in particular, but not only in favor of sustainable, secure energy policies. Resilience, security, and availability of supply chains come back to the top of the agenda. And the pressure and the bottleneck and consequential price peaks and ups and downs, which presently affects supply chains, many of them indeed, not only, but also energy, at every quarter of the world, actually do reinforce this feeling. The last report from the IPCC shows that climate trends continue to deteriorate rapidly, and that mitigation measures taken or envisaged so far will not be sufficient to change the dynamic of the global warming. Consequently, a feeling of urgency now emerges as it appears that tangible and dramatic impacts of global warming may happen at a much earlier horizon than anticipated until now. Last, in many countries, governments have implemented plans to sustain their economies during and after the COVID. The size of this public plan are sometimes very significant and will to a large degree be used to boost and support the energy transition. So what does that mean for the future, and what is going to be the new normality when we are back to normality? One, the trend towards energy transition, including further decarbonization, are inevitable, and additional action have to be taken and initiated shortly now to achieve the net zero target in reasonable time. Second, energy transition is not only resulting from climate stress, it's also a combination of many other factors such as technology innovation, deeper digitalization of society, and disruptive evolution of the demand side. It's not only about emission, and it impacts all aspects of our human society. This will imply economic transformation of a huge magnitude, heavy, complex, costly, long, and in some instances, painful. Major flows of capital are needed, and the industry will have to to several priorities at the same time, to secure the supply flow of energy now, but also to innovate and invest in greener energy to respond to the present challenges of the future. Just to add another, at the same time, in the mid to long-term future, industry will have to face an increase in global energy demand and at the same time important destruction of demand in some places, in some sectors, and anticipate new energy usage and users. Combining these different realities all together will be extremely complex, and choice between priorities might have to be taken. Responses to challenge of energy transition and greener economy will be very diverse depending on context, history, priority, and ability of each country. And there is no one given solution for all. This transition is of such an importance and impacts so many aspects of our society that it is simply impossible to neglect its human dimension. The risk of new inequality among population, among countries, the necessity to adapt individual behavior, the emergence of a more consumer-centric ecosystem, new expectations by community or people, and in particular younger generation, all this call for more focus being given on the social and societal impact and acceptability by people. People will have to be informed to understand why and how changes are needed, and they need to be associated to the implementations of the new instruments. Acceptability will require that protection or alternatives are made available for the ones that will be affected negatively. Taking care of human dimension is a condition for a smooth energy transition, and this is why the World Energy Council has decided to put more highlight on the imperative of the humanizing energy. In regard to the size of the efforts needed and the risk involved, no country can be successful by its own. Cooperation, openness, trust are necessary at each and every level. Between governments and the industry, between industry and customer, between various sectors of the economy, at national as well as at international level. There needs to be platform where stakeholders can learn, exchange, sometimes create together better options to optimize pathway to the future energy pattern. What about natural gas? The impartial world energy scenario provided an independent outlook on the role of gas in the global energy mix. I'll make it short, but by 2040, we must never forget that fossil fuels continue to meet more than 2/3 of primary energy demand across all three energy council scenarios. And gas increases in volumes under all scenarios and scales up to become the primary source of power generation in two of those scenarios, given its potential to substitute coal and sometimes oil, and also the growth of population in particular. Indeed, the pace of evolution in the longer run will depend on many factors, including the degree of electrification of a society, as well as the extent to which CCUS can be safely and economically developed. There are good reasons to anticipate the continuation of the role of natural gas on longer period as a long transition fuel, not only to cover the demand for energy and reduce CO2 by substitution of other sources such as coal, but also because non-developed countries may have to make use of their own reserves when they have to upgrade the wealth of their populations while financing also their own energy transition. However, to maintain its prominent role, the gas industry has to engage actively into the energy transition, to maintain its efforts to protect its public license to operate. It has to engage towards greener and reliable technologies for improvement of energy efficiency at each level of the supply chains from wellhead to final use, be innovative in the way to respond to the new customers' expectations and to further reduce methane emissions. Of course, it remains also essential to maintain confidence into security and continuity of supply, and that requires trust, transparency, predictability, as well as adequate investment. Competitivity will also be decisive. The present volatility, the possible bottleneck and level of price and peaks and down as experienced within the very last weeks are probably temporary, but are at the end favorable to no one. Furthermore, energy transition may also offer opportunity, in particular for hydrogen that could play an essential role in the future to provide clean energy to industrial and mobility in particular. Although there are uncertainties on the pace at which the cost of hydrogen production can be brought down to competitive level, there is a strong push by many governments from all continents to scale up hydrogen solution, whatever the color is. The gas industry should not doubt of its legitimacy as well as its assets to participate to this process. To conclude, as we gradually recover from COVID, amplified action for mitigate climate change and target the Paris Agreement's objectives will emerge as an urgent priority. Pathway towards energy transition will be multiple, complex, disruptive, and a game changer for people and society. The energy industry is at the first row for providing solutions urgently within the policy framework provided by government. It's a great responsibility, but it's also a fantastic opportunity. Natural gas has an important role to play as an established long-term transition fuel if confidence can be maintained in its ability for secure and stable supply of demand. To meet those challenges, ability to take account and mitigate the social impact of the transformation is of critical importance. Finally, the urgency and the magnitude of what is to be done strongly call for intense cooperation between and with governments, industry, communities, customers, citizens, both nationally and internationally in spite of the present fragmented landscape. The 25th World Energy Council Triennial Congress under the theme of Energy for Humanity will be hosted by the Ministry of Energy of the Federation of Russia under the auspices of the Vice Prime Minister Novak in St. Petersburg from the 24th to the 27th of October next year. A perfect timing to draw the first lesson from the nation's new normality. I do invite all of you to participate actively and to contribute to bringing up cooperation and learning at the global scale. Thank you.
Dr. Georget, I do apologize, May, but is that painting behind you is about hydrogen? Because if it is, then the nuclear energy will dominate the picture, the red hydrogen, the blue hydrogen out of natural gas. Well, I dare say that the color down there is actually brown, so it's about coal. Is there anything left for renewables? If that painting is about hydrogen, of course.
Of course, the hydrogen solution, the role of hydrogen solution is idealistically meant to be produced from green energy if it has to be to meet the target. However, there are still a long way to go before that. It goes without saying that the first priority is to bring solutions, even if they are not perfect, to maturity and to scale up the possibility to access to hydrogen, which may be the only possibility to improve the efficiency of some sector which are hard to decarbonize in other places. You mentioned the nuclear. It's clear that nuclear is for sure a clean energy source of production in terms of emission. And I think nuclear has definitely a role to play. But I think we shouldn't stress too much about the color of this kind of such or such type of solution. Color is a much too simple way to approach the goods, what can bring a solution or whatever. No. What matters is really to measure how it impacts practically on the ground. And I think color definitely is not something enough to define the quality.
Precisely, affordable and accessible energy, as noted in the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations. Absolutely, thank you, sir. Последний выступающий у нас сегодня тоже онлайн.
And the last speaker today online, Martin Wetzela, Integrated Gas, Renewables and Energy Solutions Director, member of the Executive Committee, Royal Dutch Shell. So, Mr. Wetzela, I hand over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, it is great to be with you today, albeit in a virtual way. Jelena, thanks very much for inviting me and giving me a slot on this fantastic panel. I'm very sorry I can't be with you in St. Petersburg today, but I'm looking forward to being there 2 weeks from now and meeting many of the friends that are in the room today. First of all, before I do my speech, I would like to join the Mutual Admiration Society and congratulate particularly Gazprom, but certainly also OMV and Uniper and ourselves on the progress that's been made on Nord Stream 2. I think that is a piece of infrastructure that will soon bring a degree of calm and indeed cleaner natural gas to Europe to make sure that the winter will be warm and that the winter will pass without the kind of crises that we've been seeing in the last few weeks. And indeed, many of the speakers before me have been talking eloquently about the elements that have driven the gas market to be so disorganized lately. So let me focus a little bit more on the long term and talk about the 3 fundamental changes that I believe the gas sector needs. And I do think that's the only way to describe what has happened, actually, fundamental change, what has happened since we last spoke at this forum in 2019, 2 years ago. That fundamental change started with the pandemic, and it was followed by a worldwide economic downturn, very volatile energy prices. Today, with the help of the President, it feels like the world is calming down a bit. And in many ways, that's a good thing. But at least one way, it's not a good thing, because the world does urgently need to cut carbon emissions and tackle climate change. And this requires more fundamental change. In fact, I think the world needs to do 3 fundamental changes. One change that we are seeing in governments, one change that we see in business, and the third one that we see that we need to change in the product that brought us together here today and that binds us in so many ways, natural gas. So let me start with the change we are seeing in governments. Over the last few years, despite the COVID pandemic, and the major economic downturn it brought about, governments have shown a great will to make change and to set about tackling climate change. Russia, for example, joined the countries that have committed to the Paris Climate Agreement already 2 years ago, before COVID. And this has led to action. The Russian Duma has adopted a law aimed at limiting emissions from heavy industry. The Russian government is spending $8 billion to ensure that 15% of all cars driving around in Russia will be battery electric by the end of this decade. And then there's a fascinating experiment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Sakhalin, a place where we have a proud and successful joint venture with Gazprom. In Sakhalin, in the far eastern part of the country, a variety of politics, incentives, and regulations is now coming together to move that society towards net zero emissions. To get there, the project in Sakhalin includes tax breaks, charging stations, dedicated parking lots to promote electric vehicles on the island. It includes a ban on all petrol and diesel cars by 2035, just like the European Union has announced. A hydrogen-fueled passenger train line, and the production of wind, solar, hydro, and geothermal energy, and a shift away from coal-fired power into natural gas-fired power plants. Also, there's a project to protect the taiga forests so that nature can help absorb CO2 in order to deal with emissions that can't be avoided or reduced. And then a carbon trading scheme that will start in the middle of next year. I'm thrilled to say that last week, Shell signed a memorandum of understanding with the government of Sakhalin to see how Shell can help achieve some of these goals. And that's the type of project that fills me with real enthusiasm. That's how governments, and local and federal governments, can make a big difference. It is ambitious. It combines different parts of the energy system, and by demonstrating the effectiveness of the different policies, it can hopefully help the entire country to accelerate its strategy towards net zero emissions, and hopefully provide a bit of aspiration and inspiration to the rest of the country as well. And that will be a crucial step. But policies alone are not enough. I talked about business, and I do think companies must recognize the critical importance that that their role has in promoting this change. At Shell, we do our bit. In fact, this is the second fundamental change I want to talk about. We have set our own targets, which is a change in business. In February, Shell set out its strategy called Powering Progress to accelerate the transition of our business to net zero emissions by 2050, in step with society's progress towards achieving the Paris climate goals of remaining well below 2 degrees Celsius in terms of temperature change. It's a formidable long-term task for an energy business. And we don't have a detailed business plan that stretches all the way out 30 years into the future. So Shell, in its business plans, will need to change. And the exact changes will depend on where we can find opportunity and business value as we move towards net zero together with our customers, because that's so important. As a supplier, you can only move together with your customers. And it means the mix of products that Shell will sell will look very different in the future, with, for instance, a much larger role for biofuels, hydrogen, renewable electricity from solar and from wind. Last year, for example, we signed an MOU with Fortum, which owns wind and solar portfolio of more than 2 gigawatts, the largest in Russia. And together, Fortum and Shell will research how renewables can help decarbonize parts of Russian industry. But not all parts of industry, and indeed the wider economy, can be easily and affordably electrified. Think of production of steel, cement, petrochemicals, which needs a molecule to start with, shipping, aviations. These sectors will have to find their own route to net zero emissions. Advanced biofuels and hydrogen will play crucial roles for these sectors in the future, but these solutions will not be available overnight, at least not at the scale required. So for a long time to come, oil and gas will remain necessary for these sectors that are difficult to decarbonize. And natural gas, as you all know, has several advantages compared to other traditional fuels in providing this energy. For instance, if you produce iron and steel, a switch from coal to gas saves you 36% of CO2. And if you're producing power, it's 50%. This means that natural gas and LNG have every chance to play a crucial role in the transition to a lower carbon worldwide energy system. In fact, in Shell's most recent LNG outlook, analysts forecast gas and renewables together could make up 74% of the total energy growth in the world in the next 20 years. That's a lot of growth for us to cover. In 2020, a year that's generally not being the greatest for the oil and gas business, Sakhalin 2, the joint venture that I mentioned before that we have with Gazprom, shipped a record high number of 178 cargoes of LNG. So great opportunities for the gas sector lie ahead. And everyone in this conference should be alive to these opportunities. But it does not mean that people who work in this sector can pretend it's business as usual. Which brings me to the third fundamental change that is required, one that we should not ignore. Because the gas sector must also change. We must increase further the advantages of our product. And it starts with reducing the methane emissions that come about with taking natural gas from the reservoir to the customer. Because methane that escapes in that journey damages the environment, much more than a molecule of CO2 actually, and it damages the case for natural gas. That's why Shell announced a target to keep our own methane emissions for both oil and gas below an intensity of 0.2% by 2025. We have started a methane guiding principles coalition 4 years ago, and I've been very pleased to welcome Gazprom, Novatek, and Rosneft as members. Russia plays an active role in this agenda, because reducing methane is a task for the whole gas industry. But even if all energy companies brought down methane emissions as far as possible, burning gas will still emit greenhouse gases. So we are pursuing ways to offset and mitigate these emissions. One way is CCS, carbon capture and storage, removing CO2 from the source of the emissions and storing it safely away under the ground, usually in old gas fields. Shell, for example, is doing this with its Quest project in Canada, the Gorgon project in Australia, and the Northern Lights project in Norway. Another way of reducing the concentration of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere is by protecting and working with nature, such as by planting trees, such as the project that we have in Sakhalin. I already mentioned that taiga forest protection is a huge opportunity, not only in Sakhalin, but in the rest of Russia. And indeed, Shell has projects that protect natural ecosystems like forests and wetlands in Germany, in China, Guatemala, US, and in many other countries in the world. Now, strengthening the advantage of natural gas and LNG by capturing and storing carbon and by using nature-based solutions is not easy. We are making significant progress. And we're starting to see the results. In March this year, Shell and Gazprom delivered Europe's first carbon-compensated LNG cargo. And I'm happy to see the recent second delivery from Sakhalin Energy to Japan. In fact, since 2009, Shell has collaborated with producers and buyers across the globe to produce nearly 20 other LNG carbon-compensated cargoes. Carbon compensated means that Shell has ensured that an amount of CO2 equivalent to that associated with the production, delivery, and use of the fuel has been removed from the atmosphere by using nature-based carbon credits. This is change. This is fundamental change, and the world needs much more of it. Biogas will be another example that we are pursuing. We need much more of all the three different types of change. Governments achieving a state of net zero emissions to tackle climate change. It means companies like Shell delivering the strategy called Powering Progress to accelerate the transition to net zero. And for our product, it means the gas sector makes natural gas and LNG more acceptable by reducing methane emissions, mitigating emissions where they cannot be avoided, and taking action, as we did together with Gazprom, to deliver carbon neutral LNG cargoes. Nobody can achieve these fundamental changes alone. Business, governments, and society will need to work together. And it's events like these, platforms such as these, that help make those connections and help getting a common discussion going about what it takes. If we do work together, I have no doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that natural gas and LNG will play a crucial role in the transition to a net zero emissions energy system, and in fact can be part of that system. Thank you.
Danke wel. Вообще, на самом деле, сейчас слушаю.
You know, I've been listening, and I remember, well, that was a good thing that I traveled to Holland. We're just speaking the same language, and I'm not meaning grammatics here. I have a good timing, feeling of time. We're just coming to the last minute. That's why I'm asking you the last question. At the beginning of the last month, I remember there was this idea heard everywhere. The idea that there is like 30 years left for commercialization of gas, so we have to hurry up because there won't be a need for it. It might seem naive and cliche to ask this question such prominent people, but still, I want to hear, like, what do you think about it? Will we really run out of gas in 30 years? Let's begin from the beginning. Yelena. You know, me being a representative of the gas industry, that question is absurd.
Will the gas era be over in 30 years?
I think it's an interesting question to ask, and usually we have always in all industries been creative enough to continuously find ways how to identify new resources and things like this. So I would be, we will see in the next 30 years how these things develop, but I'm sure we will not run out of the resources.
Oh, absolutely. And these last 2 weeks have demonstrated that we will not run out of the era either. But anyway, who was the third? Dr. Kang.
Well, and I don't know. The 30 years is enough period to judge gas is a good fuel. But I have to say this before finishing. We have two diseases on planet under the name of climate change. One is emission, the other is pollution. But we, collectively speaking, this is climate change. But we have to different the medicine for pollution and the emission. So that's why, and the gas can be solution or the problem. So where you look at it, the emission-wise, gas might be problem. But the pollution-wise, the air quality-wise, is absolutely gas is added value to improve the quality of life. So I think in that sense, and 30 years later, natural gas is essential energy in all the sector of our human being.
Professor Marbach.
To be honest, this is impossible to answer, impossible. And 30 years ago, I lived in Germany. We had the breakdown of the wall. Think of what happened over the last 30 years.
What wall?
And now think about the next 30 years. You know, so many things can happen. I think it's impossible to answer that question.
Well, that's a good end for our conference. Спасибо большое за внимание. Мы действительно выдержали хронометраж, просто минут.
Thank you very much. We made it in time. I wish all of you luck, have interesting sessions, and I thank everyone who came here today and who participated online. Thank you. See you soon.